BLUF Gaming here with a quick tutorial showing you exactly what you need in a small base to get everything you need done in Space Engineers. This is the bare minimum to do everything you need, just spaced out a little bit so that you can see it. I've made a 6x5 platform and I started with this cargo container so we have a place to put things. It is connected to a small reactor on top which has a port on the outside. Have that on the outside, it's important. The cargo container connects to our refinery, which can turn ore into materials, and we have a conveyor tube and a conveyor junction that connect it to this assembler, which turns those materials into components. We've gone off another conveyor port up here to loop around and connect to this O2H2 generator. This turns ice into oxygen and to hydrogen. And then it is connected to this medical bay, which we can use as a spawn point, as well as a place to recharge our health, O2, H2, and energy in our suit. Now, none of this will work unless you give it some uranium ingots, so make sure you have uranium ingots before you start stripping things apart in your ship. For instance, if you wanted to take the reactor out of that ship and use it on your base, make sure you have uranium to put in it. Don't wait until your ship has died. If you'd like to see more details in how I've done this and exactly why you want to do it this way, feel free to stick around for the rest. Thanks for sticking around. If you're new to BLUF Gaming, BLUF stands for bottom line up front. We get all of the important information from a tutorial and we put it right up front before the intro so that you can get the information you need and get right back to your game right off the bat. Once that's done, we get to the point we're at now where I'll go from the beginning to the end and show every little detail of how things are done. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start building a base here. I'm going to build a 6x5 platform using blocks. 6 by 5. And you can see we have frames right here that are being placed instead of the full blocks. Every frame takes one steel plate. You can make steel plate out of iron and an assembler. So once I have these set up, next I want to put a medical room down. Now if you don't have a medical room in your toolbar, press G and you can either find it through the menu system on the left here, or you can take the shortcut and just type medical and it will show up right there. But I already have it in my toolbar, so I'm going to place it right here in the corner. And then on top of that, I want to have an O2H2 generator. Now if you see, the O2H2 generator has a few different ports around it. It also has one on each end. What I want to do is place this generator so that we have one of these side ports on the corner, the top corner of the medical bay. If you're wondering how I floated up there and you're very new to the game, I pressed X to use my jetpack, and then from that point on you operate similar to a ship, so you can press spacebar to gain altitude and then X to turn it back off. Just be careful you don't fly into anything solid too quickly or you may take damage. That includes flying into the ground too quickly, sometimes called falling. Next, we want to put an assembler. I don't have one in my toolbar yet, so I'll just type an ASS right there and I get an assembler here. And while I'm doing this, let me go ahead and get a refinery in my toolbar and let's do a reactor. I'll replace my drill with a reactor, and then a cargo container. Let's do a small cargo container right here, and let's see, that gives us blocks, assembler, refinery, reactor, small cargo container, conveyor tube, and I guess that's about it. I'm probably forgetting something, but you know, it's no big deal if I am. So you see how right here I have light armor block, and then here I have conveyor tube, and they both have a plus next to them. If we look at the conveyor cargo block category, you'll see that we have one here, it has the plus next to it, and then here we have a conveyor junction, and there we have a curved conveyor tube. You don't actually need to use these two unless you really want to, because the one with the plus means there are multiple items within this, and that this is actually a category that only takes up one slot. So for instance, with our building block, a regular armor block, it has a plus next to it, and if we have it selected in scroll wheel, you see we can choose different shapes. So I'm going to start with our conveyor tube and change it to a conveyor junction, and I will place a junction right there. On top of that, I'm going to place an assembler upright, and I'll need to fly if I want to see on the top of this, and that should be fine right there. Just like the O2 generator, the assembler has 2 ports on the sides and then a port on each end. You see these smaller looking ports, we'll talk about those later. Those are for modules, and I'll cover modules in a separate tutorial. Next, I will place an actual conveyor tube, and then after the conveyor tube I will place my refinery. Now if you look at the refinery, it also has a port on each side and a port on each end, just like the other two we've looked at so far. And it has 8 different ports for modules on it. You don't have to have everything spaced out exactly like I have spaced them out. I'm just using this configuration because it will allow for easier teaching. Next, I want to place a small cargo container right here. And if you remember, there is a port on the refinery right there. We can't really see the port now because it's just a frame, but there is a port there. Now if you're trying to place your conveyor tubes and they aren't being placed correctly, or perhaps even your cargo containers, it's because some items can be placed using a single steel plate, and other items, their frames can be placed using a single interior plate. So before you start framing up your base, make sure you have some steel plates and some interior plates in your inventory. Finally, on top of this, I want to place our reactor. The reactor only has 2 ports. There they are. And we want one port connected to the container, and the other port we want facing out so that we can access it as needed. The only thing left remaining to do for this tutorial, at least so far as framing up is concerned, is we need to connect our assembler here using a curved tube. We need to connect it over here to our O2. Oops, I missed one, and I'm almost out of hydrogen. But yeah, we need to connect those using conveyor belts. I just need to change that to a curved and we'll be ready. But I'm almost out of hydrogen, so let me go in the ship and use this medical room. The medical room refills all 4 of the bars in the bottom left, assuming it has access to everything it needs. With access to power, it will refill your health and your suit's power. And if it has access to an O2 H2 generator, or an O2 tank or an H2 tank that has gas in it, it will refill the corresponding meters in the bottom left for O2 and H2. Now, just to fix that quick mistake I made, Let me fly up there with my grinder out. The grinder is used to remove items, and it does give you everything back that was used to build it, with very few exceptions. I think with batteries, for instance, batteries won't give you everything back, but the vast majority of blocks and devices in the game will give you everything back. Now we have framed up a base that has absolutely everything necessary to live in a peaceful environment. If you were in a hostile environment, you would also want to add on some defenses of some sort. The Gatling guns are excellent for starting defenses, and just a Gatling gun or two on the top and the side should cover you. If there are beasts on the ground, then obviously you want Gatling guns that can aim at the ground, but a lot of servers have those turned off because they're still rather buggy. The AI is not that great, but a lot of servers without creatures on the ground do still have meteor showers, and you don't want the meteors hitting your base. So if meteor showers are turned on, be sure you have a Gatling gun or two on top of your base that has access to ammo. For this particular base, if meteors are falling, I'd want to encapsulate it in some sort of walls, but right now I'm just trying to show you the basics that you need to survive. So all of these things, in order to finish building them, because right now we just have frames, you'll need to use your welder, and you'll also need whatever components it calls for. For instance, our container here has a long list of things that it wants on the right side. Most of these things can be built using steel, nickel, and silicon. Occasionally you'll have things like in this list, such as the metal grids, which will require some cobalt. That's why it's very important that we follow our earlier tutorials and we go ahead and scope out where all the ores are before we settle down and start building. There's no cobalt at my current location, but I know from my earlier scouting that I have cobalt not too far away. Now, I did a little bit of doctoring to this world between the last tutorial and this one, and I went ahead and built this setup right here. So if we skip ahead, after we've gathered all our materials and we used our blowtorch here to assemble everything, this is what we're left with. We have the container here and our reactor up top. Here we have our refinery and a conveyor connecting to, we have a conveyor tube connecting to a conveyor junction which connects to our assembler. You could have directly connected this conveyor tube to the assembler, but I want to leave this set up in this manner so that later on in another tutorial I can cover modules, because as you can see there's a module port here and there's a conveyor port here, whereas here it's 1 and 1. So there's a bit of a difference there, and I want to explain that later. Now you'll notice these conveyor tubes are all giving us red lights. Also, our generator doesn't look so hot. That's because this base, it really needs some power. So I did go mine some uranium between videos, and you can see the hole right here where I went down to mine. So I mined some uranium ore and I put it into the ship for processing. You can see I have a lot more uranium than when you start, and the refinery is still working on the uranium ore that I gave it. So what I'm going to do is steal 1 uranium, and before I do that, a lot of people will run into this problem where you can see that, for instance, if you need a lot of an item, you can shift click to get 10. You can, shift click to get 100, control click to get 10, and then control shift click to get 1,000. But what if you just want 1? Well, if you just want 1, you need to right click on the item and drag it to the container where you want it. That gives you this dialog where you can enter 1 and get exactly how many you need. So let's take that 1 uranium ingot over to our base over here and see how that changes things. What you want to do is put your uranium directly into your reactor if your base has no power at all. I could put it directly into this cargo container, but the reactor doesn't have any power to pull it out of here. If I put it into the reactor itself, that gives the base power. In the future, if I add uranium to that cargo container, you'll see that the reactor pulls it out instantly because it knows that's what it needs. It didn't pull it earlier because it had no power to use the conveyor system. Now our reactor is turned green, meaning it's providing power, and you can see our conveyors have also turned green, meaning that everything is connected. Now all we need to do is give this O2 generator, this O2H2 generator, we need to give it some ice, and once it has ice, we can use this medical bay to gain more than just the energy and power. You see, right now I'm not gaining O2 and H2, but if I put my hand drill back into the toolbar, I can come over here, get a little bit of ice, and once I put it in the O2 generator, my medical bay now gives me oxygen and hydrogen. There is also an O2 tank and an H2 tank that you can build for your bases or for your ships. However, if all you're doing is using ice to give you a bit of oxygen and hydrogen and you have tons of ice, there's really no need to build the tanks. Tanks are more important later whenever you're building ships that might need to stockpile a lot of the gas. In case you're curious, yes, you can put ice just directly into this container and it will go through the reactor, through that conveyor, up through your assembler, all the way over to this oxygen generator. Let's watch that in action. You won't actually see anything happen except for all this ice disappearing and being added down here. So now we have a basic base that we can use to do all the basic survival things that we have to do. Our assembler makes components, our refinery turns ore into materials, and our medical bay provides us with a spawn point and an area to heal up all 4 of the bars in the bottom left. That's all for now. Obviously you can make this more compact, and I welcome you to do so, especially when you're trying to build a ship that uses the same components. Or you can make this far more grand and more attractive. I also welcome you to do that. The only reason I use this setup, as I said earlier, is so that you could see everything clearly and understand what's going on. I hope you watch more of my tutorials. If you have an idea of what you'd like to see me cover, just comment below. Or if you'd like, you can like and subscribe. I always welcome that. And if you really want to dislike the video, I guess I can't stop you. But if you do that, I'm going to have to go off camera and scold my dog for itching his left ear too long. Catch you next time, engineers. Glad you watched, and I hope to see you around.